Hi, everyone. My name is Farnia Fernell. Together, we're here to deliver a refreshing and insightful, just-in-time workday session meant to set you up for greater productivity. For those of you joining us for the first time, our series is called Leadership COGS. And today we're talking about choosing your words and harnessing your power in whatever way you can to control and manage the perception about your performance. So, words are important to me. And in one of the posts that I shared about today's session, I shared why. When I was younger, I had a lisp. And I grew up with that lisp and went through several exercises to work through it. But it was a challenge for me. And what it caused me to do was stay silent in a lot of circumstances where I was ready to step in and I was ready to be present. But it was the thinking about my words that limited what I actually did. So, for those who don't know me, after years as a Fortune 100 senior global leader in financial services and consulting, I realized that there was a gap in my understanding. I'm a first gen systems engineer trained in business. I knew process and I knew technology inside and out. Yet my difference in culture, in addition to my, difference in language and ability to articulate, caused me to struggle with many, many, many unwritten rules that help the best leaders and the best teams to thrive. So I used what I knew and I learned a lot more, and I launched the Lenserf Group. And nearly 12 years later, we've worked with thousands of leaders and teams across 44 countries to soar past their limitations and exceed their potential. So, a quick reminder for where we are today. We are at Leadership COGS, and I'll just quickly go over this framework for you. This is the framework that after all of this time working with all of these people across the world, I realized that there were a couple attributes tied to high performance and maintaining momentum. The first is C, and C stands for celebrating consistency. So those with the highest performance know how to just celebrate what worked well and consistently maintaining a momentum of acceptance for what has happened and continuation to recognize whatever progress that might be. The O is for ownership, and that's really what we're talking about today is ownership for your words. The O is taking ownership of not only your being, but also your actions. And words tend to fall under that action or inaction. The G. The G is for growing out of the glue. And the glue is for where you might be stuck in something. But what we know about high performance is if you don't feel the little bit of stuck, then you don't know that you're necessarily growing. So growing out of the glue, every time you get out, you're somewhere different. And that somewhere different has propelled you. The S. The S is the stamina to stretch. And you see my arm stretching into what's next in spite of the discomfort that may be tied to stretching. So again, our focus today is the O in the ownership that is tied to your words. So where do we want to start? Choosing your words about yourself. Some might say, well, why does this matter at work when I'm talking about myself? Well, it matters. How often do you see or hear yourself saying any of these words? I must. I should. I think. I need to. I can't. I have to. I'm bad at this. Oh, this is horrible. I'm tired. Do you hear yourself saying any of these phrases? Feel free to just raise your hand in the chat or drop it in the chat. I met it with a client recently who shared getting invited to an executive committee meeting. And what was exciting about being invited to this meeting was the meeting structure was very different than the way that this particular client had seen these executives behave before. They laughed and they joked and they ribbed at each other, but they still managed to get things done. So the conversation that we had was about who are you really, right? So you've been invited to that meeting. Now, who was invited to that meeting? What version of you was expected to be there? Was that the version who is now their colleague and a co-executive? Who is that person? Why were you invited to that meeting? What is it that you have the opportunity to contribute? Because that person with those responsibilities has different words. That person uses different words. And the question became, how does that person make the contribution and what does she say? Because the way you talk to yourself influences your mindset, it influences your confidence, it influences your performance. And shifting from I have to I get to turns obligations into opportunities. See, your language creates a perspective. So if I say, I need to do this, if you didn't notice, my eyes just rolled in my head and I didn't even control that. I need to do this. It doesn't feel like whatever it is that comes after I need to do this is something that I'm in for. If I were to shift that I need to do this to I can't wait to do this, there's a hunger, there is an energy, there is something different that shows up in those words. There's opportunity rather than a responsibility. Your inner dialogue, that have to, that must, it sets your limits. You saying, I'm not good at this, rather than I am learning how to do this. And the fact that I'm learning puts me on a journey somewhere. It doesn't leave me with that G, the G for glue. It doesn't leave me stuck in the fray. The I'm learning, I'm growing is growth mindset versus the I'm just not good. The resignation. Speak possibility into your future. In your workplace, if there are words that you're using that sound something like this, the I'm tired of the same old blank, blank, blank. How can you shift? What are those new words that you might invite? It could be I'm tired. It could be like, I'm feeling fatigue. And what I might do about that is X, Y, or Z. Words influence how others see you. From the I think that was on the screen a moment ago, because when you say I think, maybe, I'm not sure, rather than based on my experience, here's my perspective. So both of them might be true, but which one would you believe? If someone came to you and said, I think maybe, but I'm not sure, perhaps, or if they were saying, based on my experience, I may not have had every experience, but based on my experience, here is my perspective. There's a credibility that changes about whatever comes out next. So how else can we talk about choosing our words? I'm going to share my screen once again, and we're going to shift a little bit to choosing words about others. So what we know is that words literally rewire the brain. And studies of neuroplasticity and positive language, there's a couple of many doctors at this point, but Dr. Andrew Newberg and Mark Waldman, I believe the name is, they're authors of Words Can Change Your Brain. And they found that positive words stimulate the prefrontal cortex, and that enhances reasoning and emotional control. So this is like your executive center control. And negative words, they activate the amygdala, which triggers that whole fight or flight, the flight that we all tend to experience. So using constructive language in feedback, if this is you and you have a team or you work with people and you have the privilege of offering feedback to others, this is where this can really make a difference. So if you use language like, let's build on this idea, rather than this just won't work, something different is triggered in that person who's receiving that input. So think about a time when you had the privilege of offering feedback to someone else and using words, your words, with someone else. What did that sound like? Was it building language? Let's build on that. Or was it just shutting it down? You know what? Let's move on. Sorry, this is not happening. It's not working. One of them encourages creativity and problem solving and engagement, and the other not so much. So what is the outcome that you're going for? And you get to choose the words that can inform that outcome. Consider reframing your words to inspire growth rather than shutting down ideas. Your words, they help shape other people's identities. Now, there's an effect, it's called the Pygmalion effect, and it basically says that people rise or they fall to the expectations that are set by other people. Back in, I think it was 1968, I said, I think. Did you notice that? I think. And then you're thinking, is that true? Because I'm talking about choosing your words, but I said, I think. Yes, it's 1968. There was a study that found that students labeled as high potential, they performed significantly better than students who weren't labeled in that way. Now, I don't know if you heard about that particular study, but simply by labeling these students as high performing, they saw a different outcome in those students. So in your workplace or in your environment, think for a moment about who you might call a natural leader or a strategic thinker in your organization. What do they look like? And who are you not calling those kinds of names? What do they look like? Decide what attribute you would like others who are in your ecosystem, if they're important to you, what attributes do you want them to assume? And today, even right now, you can begin calling them forward into that descriptor. Beginning right now. And I stress the beginning right now. I'll give you an example. Just earlier today, there's a project that me and my team are working on. And I'll say I have the most amazing team in the world. Why? Because literally just this morning, we had a last minute event pop up. It's on a Saturday, this Saturday, and one team member agreed to pick up another team member. And then the other, who already had a conflict, decided to change a schedule. Now, I don't know how this happened. This is not an outcome that I could have ever dreamed of, but it just happened today. So I would be doing a disservice not to say that I have the most amazing team in the world, because I'm not even calling them forth. They've already demonstrated excellence, but this is acknowledging that level of excellence and dedication. And simply by doing so, there's something different that you're calling forth in the team. It's something that has been uncovered that can be continued to be called forth. No, do we want everyone working Saturdays? No, that's not the point of this. There was something that was beyond the call of duty that showed up. There's acknowledgement that can happen. There's a choice of words that can happen. The way you ask questions, think about yourself, the way you ask questions can affect your credibility and your influence as well. I'm going to ask questions in two different ways and just invite the folks gathered here today to listen. One, I'm not sure, but do you think this could work? Just by a show of reactions, tell me if that sounded very credible. Just look at those reactions. I'm not sure, but do you think this could work? Right. The other, what is the most effective way to make this work? Say it again. What is the most effective way to make this work? By a show of hands, I wonder who thought the first one was the more credible. Just drop a 1 or a 2 in the chat. We'll see which one felt more credible for you. All right. Yeah, 2. Yeah. What is the most effective? Both of them express some degree of uncertainty. What is the most effective way? It means there was a question that could be answered. But it didn't say, I have no clue. I have no idea. A resignation. I'm not sure, but do you think perhaps maybe might come next? There's no credibility there. The way you ask questions, think about the questions that you tend to ask and how do you frame them? And let's move on to circumstances. So in circumstances, how do you frame the circumstances that shape you? How do you frame what happens to you or what can happen through you? Research says that how you frame circumstances shapes your resilience and your growth mindset. The words you use to describe a situation both influences your brain's responses to it. We know that in cognitive psychology research, that reframing a challenge can actually reduce stress. So simply reframing a challenge can reduce your experience of stress. And it can increase problem solving because when you feel capable of solving that problem, you're more likely to find a solution. This is almost building that bridge from that amygdala response and getting you back to your executive function. So how you frame circumstances shapes your resilience and your growth mindset. Next up, about circumstances. Blaming versus ownership. And we're with ownership today. We are celebrating that O of COGS, celebrating ownership. See, I'm losing all the language of COGS today. The ownership of COGS. Blaming versus taking ownership really determines your power. Ask yourself, do you take ownership or do you blame external forces? The way you talk about challenges, it determines how you're going to move through them. Mindset is often categorized into internal locus of control or external locus of control. And that basically means in the external locus of control, you might say things like, this happened to me. This happened to me. And then you might find a way to blame others or outside forces. This happened to me because there was traffic and there was a car and then there's lots of things that come. Where this happened to me and my desk was moved and then now I'm sitting in the corner facing the garbage can. External locus, this happened to me versus internal locus, meaning I can influence what happens next. I can influence what happens next. So something might have happened to me, but my focus, my locus of control is not on what happened to me, it's what I choose to do next. I take ownership for the next. That's the most powerful. Today we're ownership. Deciding to take that ownership for what can happen next is reclaiming your power. People with the internal locus, what research has shown is those whose words are about agency and possibility and take responsibility, they tend to be stronger leaders who navigate adversity much, much better. And over the long term, they achieve greater success than those who externalize blame. So I'll repeat that. Those with internal locus who feel that they have the power to choose what's going to happen next. They're exerting their agency and responsibility. And they're often stronger leaders who are more resilient. They navigate adversity much, much better and tend to be, over the long haul, a greater success. So, so I'll jump to our fourth point for today. So I told the story of my childhood lisp. Sally saw seashells on the seashore. And it was very difficult to say that and with the speed that I was expected to do so. Now you say, well, how does Sally and her seashells affect me in my workplace? But that issue with my speech caused me to develop many habits that reinforced silence. So in this point, I'll say choose words or choose to communicate. Where I chose silence back in the day, that wasn't helpful. But staying silent, unless there's another auditory challenge that you may be faced with, staying silent is not a choice. If you have the ability to communicate in a way, be it written or otherwise, choose to be present because silence, one, can be interpreted as agreement. There's an effect called the bystander effect where people don't speak up because they assume somebody else is going to do it. Like, if I don't say that, somebody's going to say something. The bystander effect. And how many times does somebody actually say something? Big challenges in your workplaces happen because no one chose to say something, or very few might have decided to take ownership. So choosing to say something, there's a saying on New Jersey Transit and that goes into New York, the Port Authority says, if you see something, say something. This is a whole campaign. If you see something, say something. Choose words. Silence can be interpreted as agreement. And if you don't agree, you have an opportunity, I'm using that word intentionally, to speak. There's research that was done by Dr. Amy Edmondson from Harvard on psychological safety, and it shows that when leaders fail to speak up in the workplace, it creates cultures that are fear-based and they stifle innovation and it allows problems to persist. So when the leader in an organization, and that leader might be you, if you're on the line now, when leaders choose silence, it adversely affects how someone feels about their safety in the workplace. Because your leader chose silence, you feel unsafe. Because you, as leader, think silence might be easier. It's silence, but something's happening to people, so that silence has a voice. And then lastly, choosing your words. The words you don't say can cost you credibility and influence. We talked about credibility and influence a moment ago in the words that you might say, well, perhaps do you think maybe? But the words you don't say can also cost your credibility and influence. Studies on leadership communication show that people who remain quiet in discussions, they're perceived as less knowledgeable or less engaged. So you might think, oh, well, if I don't say anything, then nobody can think I'm stupid. Oh, okay. Or it could be the exact opposite. Because you don't say anything ever, they think you have no clue. And it might even come to a point where people wonder why you may be invited to those meetings. It might come to the point where you get uninvited to places because you don't speak, you don't participate, you're not there. So some contribution is better than just no contribution because that may be sensed as disengagement. A good friend shared with me the other day that he was in a setting, it was an engineering setting, and you had very technical engineers there, and he was invited. They also, a very technical person, and realized in their small groups that people who were talking, sometimes they couldn't quite get thoughts together. So he decided, you know what, like I'm here, like I'm not as techy as the others, but I'm here and I get what they're saying. So he simply by asking questions, and I'm saying this because this is a tool that you can take away from today. Exploration and asking questions can set you free from the tongue-tiedness or the checking out because you just don't know. Asking questions, just by asking questions, he turned into the unofficial leader of his group where they nominated him to make the presentations for the whole group. He didn't feel like he was the most knowledgeable on the team, but he chose to listen and he chose to ask them the next question. And just by doing that, they saw him as a leader. He didn't have all the answers. They were all subject matter expertise. But because he chose to speak in rather than check out, like, oof, they're way too technical for me, he was able to understand and to explain to others, and they trusted him to convey their complex thoughts to the broader audience. So I share that with you for this reason. We're wrapping up today. If you take just a few things away from today, remember this: you have the choice. And a choice that you have is to use your words. So the title today is Choose Your Words and take ownership for the impact that you make when you're communicating and when you choose not to. Ways that you can do this is watch your words. That's one. We talked about choosing your words about yourself. Take the doubt out of your words. Even if there's doubt, reframe. Change the I think to make a point and engage others because they likely share the same uncertainty. Number two, words about others. You have the power through your words to uplift or sink down. When you choose to do one or the other, don't be surprised when others respond in a way that is either great or not so great. Remember what you might have said or neglected to say. Number three, your circumstances. It's easy to be a fly on the wall or hope to be a fly on the wall. We have the opportunity to affect our circumstances, and how we can do that for number three and number four is the choice and using the power of exploration and asking questions. When there's uncertainty, ask questions. If your strong suit isn't verbally to articulate your thoughts, type them away, but choose. But I thank you for joining, and I'll be back on March 10th for another episode of Leadership COGS. In the meantime, don't forget you can catch this session and many others on demand anytime through the Better Spaces app. And if you have any questions or need help accessing your voice, feel free to connect with me. I look forward to hearing from you. You could drop me an email, or you could drop an email to team@betterspaces.com. As always, take care and be well.